Thank you. Thank you for being here today. Yeah, I'm Bill Sanda. This is Akashic Healing through your Akashic Records. The format will be, we'll have a conversation for roughly an hour, whatever questions you guys have about this work and so on. Is somebody coming? Okay, great. And so please feel free to ask questions anytime. Don't wait till we're done, but ask questions as we go along. Well, thank you for being here today. We'll have a lot of fun. We'll explore, as you were talking about, as much as we can in a short amount of time that we're doing these sessions, some aspects of you might say your past that are influencing you today and impacting your decision making, your health, your well-being, and so on. My background is lengthy, long. I grew up in Chicago area. And when I was 11, I was walking back from baseball practice, which was my passion typically as a young kid. Chicago Cubs fan, if anybody's Chicago.
Brother.
No kidding. No kidding. It's like the Boston Red Sox. Anyway, I was coming back from baseball practice, and I had no interest, background in religion, spirituality, any churches. My parents weren't interested at all. So there was nothing, I never read the Bible, never studied the Bible, vaguely heard about it, but that was about the extent of my knowledge. And all of a sudden, as I'm about a block and a half from home, I hear this voice in the back of my head say, God does not live outside of you. God lives within you. You are God. Whoa. 11-year-old kid with no background, all of a sudden.
Oh, you're drinking? No.
Yeah, I was smoking at that time. And then it went on to say that God is not a male with a long white beard, long white robe, casting hell, damnation, and thunderbolts. Oops, what do I do with this? What's going on? But I wasn't freaked out, which was interesting. It didn't scare me. I just said, oh, okay, that's cool. And I went home, told my parents, and they said, this kid's weird. And that was the extent of it. I had no context to hold that in until many, many years later. But for whatever reason, my higher self decided to tell me that God does not live outside, out there, but God is within you. You are God. And finally, many, many, many years later, I was able to really appreciate what that meant. And through this work and a lot of other work. Have you all heard of Werner Erhardt's training way back in the 70s and 80s? Yeah, that's where my first big introduction to self-help and work and so on. Was heavily involved with Werner's work and for a while. And then one of his compatriots, a guy named Fernando Flores. I don't know if anybody ever heard of Fernando from way back when. You did, yeah, way back. Fernando is probably what I would say is a genius. He's from Chile. He was at age 28 the Minister of Finance under Allende's government, which is eventually taken over by Pinochet, General Pinochet, and the CIA, which we know helped. The entire cabinet was assassinated along with Pinochet, except for Fernando. For whatever reason, there was a bombing in D.C. of one of the ministers. Quite a few years after that happened, there was a car bomb that killed, I think, one of the last remaining ministers. Yeah, it was pretty vicious and pretty violent. Anyway, he survived prison and was rescued by Amnesty International, brought back to the States. Then he got 2 PhDs, one in computer science and one in linguistics, and started doing work on what he calls conversations for action. In other words, we tend to, most of our speaking together or to ourselves is just a lot of commotion and, just, how's the weather and yada, yada, yada. And not action, not taking action verbs. So he did his whole PhD was on conversations for action. Anyway, he created a workshop called, I forget what it's called now, but anyway, I participated and then started working with him and what's called ontological design, a 3-year course, which is a study of being human. Got involved with transformational breathwork, taught breathwork in the 90s for quite a while, and worked with groups and individuals on breathwork. Had my first channeling experience with a woman named Ayanda, who, have you heard of the term walk-in? Not a walk into a salon, but a walk-in human being. Anybody not hear of the term walk-in? Okay, you all got it, okay, good. Well, that was my first experience with a walk-in. And what was really fascinating about her was that she actually, well, the woman who left the body filmed the conversion, the walk-in conversion. And so we were able to actually watch that happening. So there's a circle of people just like here, and this woman, the original woman, was in the center, and you would see her, she was sitting, and all of a sudden, white light went, shoo, and then she slumped, and then shoo, white light came back in, and then she animated again with a different personality, different soul. So her soul left, and you could see this white light emanate from her crown chakra, and then she slumped, and then white light came back in, this soul energy, and then this new persona named Ayanda took over the body, which tells you right there that, you know, our bodies are, you know, meat or whatever, and really we're animated by our soul. You know, which was really quite extraordinary experience for me to see that happening. That really then taught me that, yeah, we are soul. You know, that we're energy first and physical second. Worked with her for a while, like I said, breath work, got involved with, you guys heard of flower essences? Okay, there's a woman named Michelle Small Wright, who has a beautiful farm outside of Warrenton, Virginia. And she created flower essences called Paralandra, which are one of the most well-known of the flower essences. And she's quite an eccentric, interesting woman. I think she's still alive. She's got to be in her 90s or something right now. Amazing farm. Got involved with that, got involved with another flower practitioner named Sharon Hamilton in 2000, whom I still work with. And she created what's called light expression essences. And these essences, I use them for my daily clearing. They're quite extraordinary in that she doesn't use any physical gardens or anything anymore, you know, flowers and plants. She evolved to a place where she's just connecting with the divas in the angelic realm and creating all her 200 different essences. And she's a good friend of mine. She's out in Woodstock, Virginia, not the Woodstock, but Woodstock, Virginia, a couple hours away from here. And I work with her as one of my daily clearing practices. I also have been working since 2011-12 with a channel energy called ZAR, D-Z-A-R. You all heard of Cryon or Abraham? Yeah. Those channel energies? Anybody not? Okay. It's similar to those energies that are channeled, Cryon by Lee Carroll and Abraham by Esther Hicks. And the difference between ZAR and all these other energies is that they have you have a personal relationship with that energy. Or it's a composite of energies. It's not an energy, but a composite. And they're channeled by a couple named Mary and Gary O'Brien out of Australia near Brisbane. And Gary's the primary channel. Mary is like this, kind of like the secondary channel, and they have to be together for ZAR to work with them. And I work with them quite closely and have been for since I met with them. We go on retreats. In fact, we're going to Norway and Scotland in October on a cruise to different megalithic sites along with the fjords and that. We were in Rome last year. We were supposed to be in Bali in 2000, but of course that got canned by our dear friend COVID. And we've been in Hawaii and Alaska and so on. But anyway, it's a lot of fun energy, really great people internationally, and we communicate. We have a really extensive communication system around the world. And so that's kind of my background. I've been doing this work for 15 years. And that began when I was living in Charlottesville in 2010, Charlottesville, Virginia. And a friend of mine named Joanne who was a longtime member of the Edgar Cayce Foundation. You all know Edgar Cayce, everybody? Okay, good. So on her first gathering that she had, you know, they have a big publishing company. And on one of those books is called Edgar Cayce on the Akashic Records. Of the 14,000 healings that Cayce did, 3,000 were done in the Akash. Now in his case, he was in a trance, and he went into a very convoluted, complex meditation to access the Akashic Records. And then he had his own way of interpreting and so on. So I had some interest in the Akash, but nothing. I wasn't really looking for anything. I was going by the books just to see what was there. And all of a sudden I come by this book. It literally smacked me in the head energetically, and I heard, read me, read me, read me. I said, okay. So I bought it, read it that night. And that's when I understood or knew that I had this gift of the Akashic Records. I don't have to be trained in it. Been doing this many lifetimes, and I'm just the latest incarnation of this work. and how I do it. Now, how I do it is very different than most Akashic Record readers. You'll see today when we work, I don't work with any particular past life, like a lot of readers do. And you're this now, and 5 lifetimes ago you were like Queen of Sheba, or whatever. I don't do that kind of stuff. I'm not interested in that kind of work. A lot of other people are. My interest is to empower you to be more of who you truly are. Okay, and that's what we'll be working with today, is to empower you to be what we call your true self, your love, joy, compassion, passion, appreciation, kindness, grace, gratitude, and generosity. I was a good Boy Scout. That's the whole purpose of why I do this work. And what we're doing is it's a collaborative process. This is a collaboration. It's not me doing something to you. I can't do anything to you. You allow. And whatever resistance you might have, will also impact the work. But it's really to empower you, like I said, to be more of who you truly are. We are an infinite array of possibilities and potentialities. Every human being is. But we so narrowly walk our path mostly on our past. National Science Foundation says that roughly 95% of our energy goes into our subconscious repeated patterns that we learn through many, many lifetimes, that we repeat over and 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 again until we don't.
Eventually you get it right.
Until you get it right. And that's why we're here, to get it right, to help you get it right, to collaborate with you to get it right. Because you can go lifetime after lifetime after lifetime and do the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. So again, this is a collaborative process. It's me, I collaborate with you, your essence, your higher self, and we go play into the Akash. I call it, we go do a tango together. And I become an interpreter of those energies for you. Now, I'm fully present. I don't go into a trance like others, like Lee Carroll or Esther Hicks. They go into a trance and then they allow that energy to come in. Their consciousness leaves. It's really interesting that when Gary's talked about that, when he calls it a walkabout, being Aussie. But he said that, yeah, he actually kind of, and I don't know how he does it or what that sense is like, but he actually says that his consciousness will separate and Czar will take over, but he's still there. But he doesn't remember a lot of what happens. I do. I remember everything. Well, I actually not sure. I don't remember. Let's put this. I'm fully conscious, but I don't remember everybody's work. That would be overwhelming. Okay, so I'm not going to remember what we do with you. If you want to record your session today, you can. It's up to you. Only your session. A lot of people like to re-listen to the work later on. They get a lot out of it because you're at a different level, and the work that we're doing, it's interesting in that even though it's working with you who you are right now, but it's also working with you who you might be. It's an interesting phenomenon, an interesting way the energy works that kind of, science hasn't really gotten there yet. Anybody have any questions so far? Yes and no. Because the way I look at it is that the energy that we're in this energy field throughout the universe, a single energy field, okay? Mm-hmm. And Earth is in that obviously a part, and there's no real separation. Like when I was told at 11 that God is not outside of you, God is within you, you are God, there is no separation between that energy and us. It's just that we as the physical beings create a separation. Right. But the energy is always there. The Akasha is always there. Whatever we call that, that label, that energy. And everybody here, every human being has the ability to access their own Akashic Records. Anybody here, if you wanted to do it. It's not entirely complicated to do. There are a lot of teachers out there that can teach you using a prayer, meditation, different kind of journeys and so on. There are a lot of different ways of accessing the Akashic Records. There's no one way of doing it. There's no like my way, and my way is the only way. No. But everybody here has an ability to access that. Same with what we call light language, which we'll talk about in a minute. Because that energy is all there. There is no separate energies for, say, Reiki, go out 500 light years to make a right-hand turn, and there's Reiki, make a left-hand turn, there's the Akashic Records. No, but that's how a lot of humans look at these energies. I'm Reiki, or I'm this, or I'm that. No, it's just It's the way that the human being attunes to the energies. It's like your antenna. We got these little thingies up here going wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. And our antennas, and everybody's tuned a little bit differently. So how you attune it was, okay, so you attune to, say, what we call Reiki. Well, Reiki is a certain kind of frequencies, and Akasha is certain kind of frequencies, you know, or access consciousness, or quantum touch, or whatever you're doing, it doesn't matter. But each human being will tune in, you know, differently and separately. And sometimes you get a lot of radio interference, which we would call your subconscious pattern. So we're looking to clear that interference, like the radio interference, so you have a coherent message coming through. So I have a coherent message coming through with the Akash, and you can all do that. It's not like this is rocket science. It's not. If you've read any books on the Akashic Records, Linda Howe is one of the leading teachers. She's out of Chicago. She wrote a book in 2010 called How to Read Your Akashic Records. It's a cookbook. It's a recipe book, basically. You do this, you do that. Here's a particular prayer, which I will, for the first person I work with, I will use that prayer so you get a sense of what an Akashic prayer sounds like or looks like. And out of just practice, when I first had this experience back in 2010, I just started grabbing friends left and right to practice for a couple months. You know, because I was remembering how I used to work with the Akashic Records in prior lifetimes. I didn't need to be taught. I didn't need to get a certification or whatever. It was just, this is just who I am. And you know people like that. You know, you have that kind of access, and probably you all here may have it one way or another. And you could call it our gift, but every human being has that ability, whatever that may be. It doesn't have to be something where you're quote unquote a healer or whatever. No, it could be your gift, could be a baseball superstar or whatever the case might be. Yeah, because I've talked to people who just like musicians. You hear Paul McCartney and the Beatles talk about, oh, I just got this lyrics. There it came. Yeah, same with John Lennon, same with a lot of other musicians, you know. Mozart, I mean, at age 6, I mean, you know, the kid is writing a symphony. You know, kids don't do that, you know. Or these prodigies, you know, violin prodigies or whatever, piano prodigies and so on. So humans, we want to label everything. Okay, we want to label these energies. Archangels, angels, ascended masters, you know, Bill, Joe, Charlie, whatever you want to call them, you know. And one time I was in a webinar with Czar, and somebody brought up the question about God. You know, what is God? What is the creator energies? And Czar started playing with it and said, well, you can call it Bernie, you can call God Charlie, you can call him Sue, it doesn't matter. We just a label that we put on these energies. Humans want to anthropomorphize everything. You know what that word means? Anybody not heard the word anthropomorphize? We want to try to describe what we don't understand in human terms. So we kind of not downgrade, but we try to compartmentalize what we don't understand with labels. Angels, archangels, you know, and so on, so on and so forth, okay. I'm told over and over and over again, you know, that we don't care. I mean, we're energy. But you guys, you humans, label us. Because then we have a discrete information, oh, there's Archangel Michael and Archangel, you know, Gabriel and so on and so forth, that have certain discrete, that we put on them certain properties or certain ways of being or whatever, okay. But that's human. So I don't work with, I mean, what we call archangels, this or that or whatever, you know. Occasionally I will experience what we call starseeds, energies from the Pleiadians or the, you know, Arcturians or whatever, that we label these energies. And, you know, it's just energy. You know, people really need to understand that we are in an energy field. There is no separation. But we were taught by religion, so on, that we are these little schmucks, and then there's this major God out there, all powerful, and you know, and we're these insignificant little beings. We're not. You know, we're a part of God. We're all a part of God. We are God. Yeah. So what happens in here with what you're talking about is that we create an energy field, and so one thing I like about groups is that it actually amplifies the work that we're doing. That's right. Okay, so even though I'll be sitting up here, you know, with, say, Joseph, and we're doing work together, but you guys are also doing your work based on what we're working with Joseph, because there are a lot of similar issues going on with us. we've all gone through atrocities, we've all gone through, you name it, at one degree or another. So you will be impacted by the work that we're doing up here. So, just to pay attention when we're working, be in a meditative state and just pay attention to what's happening in your body, your emotional body, physical body, mental body, and so on, okay? Because you will be impacted one way or another. I promise you, guarantee. Been doing hundreds of these, which is fun with the group because we can do a lot more work in a short amount of time than we might ordinarily in 10, 15 minutes. Okay, to get back to the original question of what are the Akashic Records, we kind of went, this always happens. We get segues and going, I never know what's going to happen when I start talking. We just kind of go depending on the energy of the group and so on, and the kind of questions that happen. Yeah, so the Akash, again, it's just this, it's, as you were talking, it was just a part of this, it is this energy within the entire universe that there is that singular energy. Some call it the ether, some will call it dark matter, whatever you want to call it. That is, in part, is a repository of all your thoughts, actions, behaviors, patterns, feelings from all lifetimes you've existed as soul, regardless of whether you've been on Earth, you've been on wherever around the universe. Okay, it doesn't matter, or whatever kind of a shape you might have been in. All that's recorded. And so that's what we're playing with today. Now that is an aspect of the Akash. The Akash goes way beyond, you don't normally hear about this, but it's all knowledge. People can tap into their Akashic records and get knowledge and information about, people use it for businesses, people use it for scientific research, people use it for writing, for music, for whatever. Like I said, people will download lyrics or whatever, melodies. That's all coming through the Akash. We just don't normally look at it that way. We typically focus on your past lives and the energy of those past lives on who you are today and so on, okay? But it goes way beyond that, and there's a lot of different ways that you can look at it. There is a Hungarian scientist, philosopher named Laszlo, who has written a number of books on the Akashic energy field, the quantum energy field. His are more of a knowledge-based than experiential base, but it is looking at different aspects of the Akashic records. There's one book called The Akashic Experience, where he interviewed a number of scientists, even like Edgar Mitchell, when the Apollo mission astronauts, and their experiences with the Akashic records and what they call the Akash. And again, a lot of times people don't even know that they're, in a way, channeling their Akash for knowledge. It's a really fascinating look at how people can use the Akash, and not just for themselves and their own healing purpose, but to go beyond, into their work the work that they're doing and so on. So there's a lot of ways of using it. And a lot of the teachers out there will teach you different ways of working with the Akash. I don't teach because just at this point in time, I may in the future, but I'm not told to do so at this point. You will, when we're working with you, I use a number of different tools to interpret the energy for you, and most of it is not in English. Have you heard of the term light language? Anybody not heard light language? Okay. So it's a human term, like Akashic Records. This is an energy. It's a little bit different frequency than the Akash, from what I'm gathering. I don't know where the term light language came from. I don't think anybody really knows who first coined the term. You might call it the voice of God, the voice of your soul, the language of your soul, language of God, whatever. You've heard of speaking in tongue. Speaking in tongue is a form of light language. Okay, you're not going to understand when I'm start doing the light language with you. You're not going to understand it. Don't even try. Don't even begin. It's a waste of time. It may sound like different languages, like Cherokee or Polynesian or Scandinavian or whatever. I've heard people say, "Oh, it sounds like all Tibetan monks," or whatever. I call it a pre-human language. Okay, it's like the original language. And what's interesting is that the Russians have discovered that your DNA actually I don't know how to describe this, is a form of language, a primal language, a first language. So when we're working with the Akashic, we're actually working through your DNA. And your DNA is mostly quantum energy. You know, we talk about the double helix and Watson and Crick and all that good stuff, and the four amino acids that create the DNA. What science has found, this is back in the 90s when the geneticists were first doing the genome project and mapping out our genetic structure, they found that only about 3 to 5% of our DNA was actually communicating chemically with our genes. Oops. Why would only 3 to 5% of that massive amount of structure be communicating chemically with our genes? Didn't make any sense. So they coined that 95%, a highly scientific term called junk DNA. You may have heard the term junk DNA, okay? They didn't know what it was. Didn't make any sense. Russians did further, deeper experiments using lasers in the 2000s and late 90s and discovered that, most of our DNA is actually quantum energy. It's a waveform. And, you know, you heard the double split experiment, you know, between wave and particles and that. And so our DNA is both a particle, what you see, that structure in an electron microscope, and a waveform. And what we're doing here, working with you today, is we're actually working with that waveform in your DNA. Okay, that's the kind of the basis, the essence of where you connect with your DNA. Lee Carroll and Cryan wrote a marvelous book in 2010 called The 12 Layers of DNA. And in it, Cryan talks about these different layers of what the energetic, there are no actual different layers, but for us humans, we need to linearize everything, so they call it 12 layers of DNA. And one of those layers is the Akashic Records. One is your higher self, you know, and so on and so forth. If you're interested in that, it's a really great book. I do include that in the email that I sent you. But the Akashic exists within your DNA. That's how we connect with this energy, is through your DNA, okay? That's why I use light language and what I call vibrational tones to bypass your thinking, because your thinking will muddle everything, you know. We want to bypass your thinking, so we do that. I use it using light language, which came when I first started working with the Akashic. That was there for me. I didn't have to do it later on, but I didn't know that term light language until much later. So what you're going to experience today is me talking in English, and typically it's to describe what chakra we're working with. You know, and maybe a little bit more information. For the most part, we'll be doing light language and vibrational tones. Then again, we'll be bypassing your thinking, so that's why I suggest people record with your cell phone. You know, you can listen to it later on. Don't take notes, because the notes are going to be useless. It's not going to, you know, unless you want to talk to your DNA or whatever. But just really, it's for you to allow the work, you know, and to not get in the way. And that's why we're bypassing your thinking, because a lot of resistance might come up, or fear. And we'll be talking a lot about fear and about energies that you may or may not even be aware of in different parts of your energy field, your different chakras. I've had people say, oh my God, I didn't know that I was like that, you know, anger, rage, violence, and so on. One last question before we take a break. What do you think is the most prevalent, common, major issue facing humanity? The issue that I find over and 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 over again is self-love. That because we generally don't love ourselves, that's where then the fear creeps in, and the unknown, the insecurities and whatnot. But the whole point of the work that I'm doing with you is to help enhance, you know, to collaborate with you to enhance, to clear out whatever it is that is preventing you from loving yourself. That is the issue that I see that we're all faced, every human being, you know, collectively. Because when you truly love yourself, you don't drop into fear, you don't drop into anger like that. You know, fear, obviously, if you got a tiger chasing you, yeah, fear is relevant, you know. But most of the fear that we create ourselves. Yeah, so make sure that, when you're dropping into fear, what's really going on? Are you imagining this, or is it really real? Is, you know, somebody attacking you? Well, that's a different ball game. you know. But self-love, you know, I keep talking about it over and over and over. And for me, it's also an issue. I mean, I've got my own stuff that I'm working with and clearing out all the time. And I've been, you know, clearing out for 40 years or whatever, and still shit shows up, not to use that colloquial expression. But it does, you know, it's a journey. This is not a one-stop shop. You know, you do 15 minutes or an hour work with something, and all of a sudden wow, you know, you're in nirvana, you're ascended. No, that ain't gonna happen.
Oh, why not?
I know. It would be nice, but we got a lot of clearing to do, and that's our job, is to clear. One more thing before we, I wanted to talk about, have you heard of Dr. Bruce Lipton?
Yes.
Biology of belief, epigenetics. He coined the term epigenetics way 20, 30 years ago or whatever. A brilliant microbiologist. And one of the things I wanted to mention too is that one of the things he wrote in his book, Biology of Belief, in 2005, that epigenetics means beyond genes. In other words, what he's saying is that there are no fixed genes. There's not like cancer genes or this or that or so on. That our genes are influenced by the environment and how the genes respond, you know, react and so on is deeply influenced by the environment that the genes live in. And he says that, which is really interesting, that in the third trimester of pregnancy, between then and say age 6 or 7, that the child is a sponge for the environment. And that epigenetics, that your genes are really in a way formed by your environment. Obviously there are specific genes for specific tasks and so on, but for the most part you can alter your genetic structure by the environment that you live in. And one of the things I love doing is working with pregnant women and then helping them clear themselves, because they ask me, well, what's the best thing we can do? Well, be as clear as possible. You know, whatever residual anger, depression, whatever's going on, drugs, alcohol abuse, and so on. I was working a while back with a year-old baby whose mother was a fentanyl addict, and the father was a fentanyl addict. And the baby was born as a fentanyl addict and had to go through withdrawal after a month. Can you imagine as a little infant going through withdrawal? And so the grandmother got custody. This is interesting, that the grandmother got custody of the baby, and the mother, who is the daughter of the grandmother, you know, lost custody because of fentanyl. And so I had worked with her before, and she said, well, can you work with this child in terms of help clearing out whatever impact of fentanyl and the abuse that went on, you know, during pregnancy and so on. It was more than just fentanyl. And since the father was also a fentanyl addict. And it was fascinating that when I work with anybody, any age, doesn't matter. Like I said, whether fetus up through whatever, it doesn't matter. And she told me, what I do is that I usually have like 4 15-minute recorded sessions, and I'll be on the phone with one of the parents along with the child in the room. The child doesn't have to be on the phone or video, but as long as they're in the room. And the parent will have told me, and I have to have worked with one of the parents beforehand. I'm not going to go cold into a child. And so I did these 4 15-minute sessions over a course of a month. Every week we did a 15-minute session. I recorded it and sent it off to the mother or to the grandmother. And after that month, she said she noticed a remarkable shift in the child, in the behaviors. That a lot of the kind of addictive sense of what the child was going through dissipated. I worked with an autistic boy who was 4, had never spoken to his parents, and again over a 1 month time period, and the mom at the end said, for the first time, the boy said, "Mommy." And you can imagine what that would be like for the parent and for the child to actually speak. You know, so there's a lot that you can do. It doesn't matter what age, whether it's a fetus or you're 100, it doesn't matter. We're always clearing, and you always have that opportunity to clear. And whatever practice that you choose to, it doesn't matter. Whatever works for you, whether it's this or something else. So any last questions?